Welcome back to the Sports Source. This segment of our program brought to you by Games and Things, home theater seating, bars and bar stools, poker tables and seating, pool tables, stand-up classic arcade games, table tennis, shuffleboard tables. Games and Things carries them all. Life should be fun, folks, especially after 2020. Get out to Games and Things and make sure your home is a fun place to be for 2021. OurGameRoom.com is another way to check them out, but that showroom is special. If you want to go out there and have some fun, look around at Games and Things. All right, let's get this out of the way simply because it must be discussed, and that is the state of this basketball season. Florida basketball star Keontae Johnson collapsed on the court during a game a couple of weeks ago, wound up in a coma. He's now recovering, but they have since found that it's the myocarditis, the enlarged heart that can be attached to the COVID virus, which he had. Very lucky that young man didn't simply die on the basketball court. If you've seen the video, it was pretty bad. He just didn't catch himself, just face down onto the hardwood, and his teammates broke out crying. All right, so you had that. You've got in the SEC a player, maybe not, this was caused by COVID. Kara Lawson, VFL, head basketball coach this year at Duke. They have shut down their women's season this year. She said she doesn't think schools should be playing. The players had a couple of positive tests and they don't want to play. So Duke's women's basketball team is done. This isn't like football. You got 2 games a week already in terms of squeezing games in. There are no open dates. So my question is, what are you anticipating this basketball season to look like? In terms of how many games do you see Tennessee or others getting in through all this mess? You also don't have a bigger roster in terms of if you got somebody positive, you have to contact trace and everything else.
That's so hard to predict, and obviously we're going through a tough time locally and nationally with COVID. I would say Tennessee, I think, has 25 games scheduled. I think they'd be fortunate to get in 20. I don't think they'll get in all their conference games, and I think you'll see them continue to postpone or cancel games along the way, not just at Tennessee, but all throughout the SEC and throughout the country.
What do you expect?
Yeah, a number would be difficult, but I would say every week you brace for impact and know that there's a possibility that 1 or 2 of your games might not be played because you don't know what's going to happen with the other schools that are on your schedule, and you can start to get kind of a snowball effect. So I would not. The one thing I would expect is for all the games to not be played. I would expect cancellations, and making them up would be more challenging.
Chuck?
Right now, I think you're just hoping that you can keep playing, that you can see it through, and you don't have a repeat of last season where you get to the SEC tournament or whenever, and they pull the plug on it then. So that's been my hope. I mean, whether it's 16 games, 20 games, whatever it is, just keep this moving forward. But what they talk about, the national numbers and the holidays, that's going to be really interesting to see how these next few weeks play out, just in terms of how many teams have enough healthy players to play a game.
Yeah, I may be wrong, but I think they need that money so much. You're going to see an NCAA tournament some way, somehow. How you get there, I don't know. I wonder if you're going to have some teams that play 10 games in their conference and get into it the same way Ohio State played 6 football games and got in the playoff.
Yeah.
Because it's such a small roster that you don't have as much room for error. If one guy gets it, it's going to have a bigger impact than one guy on a football team.
I've seen Charlie Cream and Joe Lunardi, when they do their bracketology, they do a 68 team bracket, and then
half of that,
32, and then 16, whatever. So they're having different numbers in their brackets as to how many teams will be there. I was really surprised to see the Duke women shut down. If they're shutting down, why don't the Duke men shut down? I mean, I just thought it was an early call. I thought you might make that call a bit later, but to do that right now surprised me.
Then how far down the list are college athletes on the vaccine, to get a vaccine? I mean, that you would think may be pretty far down. And John, you'd ask a great question, a while back. Are you better to be Clemson in football and go through a rash of maybe COVID positive tests before the season or at a certain time and feel like you've at least gotten over that part? How many programs have dealt with this to a certain extent and feel like they're in better shape now than they were, before?
You've had, obviously at Tennessee, you've had some positive cases, both players and coaches, including Rick Barnes. And the belief is, you're going to have antibodies for at least long enough to get you through the rest of the season, you would hope. But it is going to be interesting. Now, I will say this. If you'd told me at the start of football season that the SEC would have 71 games, including the championship game on the schedule, and they'd play 69, I wouldn't have believed it. So they got their football games in. I just think basketball is going to be tougher because you get 2 a week.
And you also move games around if a team's off. You say, okay, you're actually going to play this team on Wednesday, and then we'll figure things out later on. So it'd be a lot of shuffling with multiple games a week with all the teams that are involved in so many games. But could you shuffle on the fly? That's something to potentially pay attention to.
And I also think that, throw out the window the idea that our schedule isn't as fair as somebody else's schedule. Or we got a tougher schedule. How come we had to play more road games and they got more home games? Just trying to get the games in.
You're just hoping you get to play.
Yeah, I know people are going to complain about it, but it wouldn't surprise me. If you're moving games around, there's nothing to say that this game that was scheduled in Lexington isn't played in Knoxville or vice versa.
We saw that with non-conference action. So if it can be done non-conference, then I would think from a logistical standpoint, it's easier to communicate that within the conference.
When the Maui Invitationals played in Asheville, North Carolina, anything's possible.
Yeah, well, didn't they have one of the Bahamas that played in somewhere out in the Midwest?
Maybe Las Vegas.
Hey, what
No,
about
it was literally like Rapid City.
South Dakota.
Yeah.
They went to South Dakota.
Yeah.
to
Well,
play
what
one
about
of
the
those
granddaddy of the bowls being played in Texas, the Rose Bowl?
right.
I thought that
Yeah.
was a typo.
Yeah, everything. Nothing is off the table this year. So, all right, let's talk about this Tennessee basketball team. Off to a hot 6-0 start. What are the strengths that we think are going to carry this team throughout the year? What are the weaknesses? Haven't seen many of them, but what are the weaknesses that we are concerned about and we want to keep an eye on? We'll discuss that next on the Sports Source. Come on back.